What are we here for? What's this life all about? Or is there a deeper meaning for our existence? How do we get in touch with the big picture? How do we cultivate the best versions of ourselves? These questions and much more will be explored in today's interview with Kurt Hill. Kurt Hill is a healer who lives in Chicago, and I had met him when he came to the Soma Institute, where I was attending massage therapy school almost 20 years ago, and he had given a motivational speech to all of the students at the time. He was just so charismatic and seemed to have a real solid grasp of healing work, not just massage. He helped us to understand that our work was much deeper and much greater than that. And I just wanted to give back a little bit by providing an interview and a glimpse that maybe not so many people get of a person who facilitates this work and in such a tremendous, powerful, productive, and positive way. I hope you enjoy. I am Daniel J. Moore, and today I'm interviewing a dear friend by the name of Kurt Hill. Kurt, how would you describe or answer the I am question? How would you answer that? Would you be so kind?
Of course. First of all, thank you very much for having me in this arena to share with you. Together, I feel that we're establishing sacred space, and it's a joy. I would probably, when asked that question, answer in this way. Because I am a healer, and I have decided to make certain that I am an authentic healer, my trek, my journey has been to learn about spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical aspects. And so body, mind, spirit is not just something we talk about, but something I've explored. And so I've done it by learning and traveling throughout the world, China, Japan, Switzerland, working with Stanislav Grof with holotropic breath work and things of that sort, learning about the mechanisms of the body, certifications with, of course, massage therapy, trigger point therapy, and other numerous modalities for certifications, but also in spirit by going to seminary and learning the aspects of not only religiosity but spirituality and the epistemologics of the search for soul identification. And after that, I decided that may have covered somewhat of the spirit, but it was important also to learn about the mind if I was going to talk about that. So I went to Adler School of Psychology and became a licensed psychologist as well. And so together, they work as a kind of perichoresis, an interconnection where body, mind, spirit are not separate, but distinguished. And distinguished in a way where, well, it's called hypostasis, where no individual aspect takes power over the other. Because I think the true disease in the world is dominance. So I am an agent of the truth of healing, I suppose.
A long time ago, when I met you almost 20 years ago, you came to the Soma Institute where I was attending massage therapy school.
Yes.
And you had said something along the lines that you had just entered a room full of closet healers.
I remember that term.
And you talked a lot about a calling. And that was one of the first things I remember you telling me was, and you had even given me a book, about calling. I think it was by Lavoie.
Lavoie, absolutely.
Can you share with us a little bit about what a calling is all about, and how does that pertain to human beings as a whole, but maybe even also specifically as it pertains to a healer or somebody who wants to work within healthcare? Can you talk about that a little bit?
A calling is something that's, to me, very sacred and very individual. And it works something like this. And that is, oftentimes we live in our image. Someone tells us that, from a stereotypical aspect, that they perceive us as one thing or another. And we try to live that out because it bodes well in society or in corporate settings or what have you. But in actuality, there's a voice inside of us that goes back to a principle that Aristotle spoke of, which was regarding entelechy. And what Aristotle talked about was the fact that when we come here to this third dimension, we don't come along. We are accompanied by something that's called entelechy. And entelechy lives inside of us. Now, when Aristotle said it, it was quite confusing. He said entelechy is the actualization of form-given cause in contrast with potential existence. Well, nobody knew what he was talking about. What? It probably takes entelechy just to figure that out. But some years later, Teilhard de Chardin, one of my favorite, came on the scene and he said, entelechy is your dynamic purpose that's encoded in you. You can't find it, you can't leave without it, and it can't leave without you. So whatever you came here to do, you came to do as you. And so therefore, no one can be a better you. You are perfectly you. The problem is that one cannot find their entelechy unless they first establish who they are. You see, because you can't star in another person's dream. It must be yours. So that alignment is essential, because your power comes from your alignment with your I am, the truth about you. And so the question that calling does, or begs, are you you? Or are you a set of agreements you made with an authority figure? And what happens with calling is it keeps asking from an internal standpoint of view, because the call is soulful. It finds itself coming in from the unconscious to the conscious. And that's important because, as Schopenhauer talked about in the Schopenhauerian theory, that unconsciousness uses consciousness as a mirror to see itself. And so these symbols and languages that we use are a tool to communicate, but in actuality, there's a much deeper sense of being that we must tap into. And that calling then says, I know what you're telling the world. You know, because, as Jung would say, esse est percepi, to be is to be perceived. But in actuality, I can either allow you to get fragments of me, or I can go on the inner journey and find out the truth of me. And the truth of me is I question who I am, and what is the voice that's saying, this is what you're here to do. This is what you must do. Find you, not arrive at a comfortable aspect of you. Gabriel Marcel writes in Creative Fidelity that he knows you can be faithful to someone else, but can you be faithful to yourself? And the answer is no, not unless you question yourself and know yourself. Doesn't mean you have to act on that which you discover, which is part of what Jung talks about in shadow discovery. But it is important for you to know who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. At that point, once you establish that kind of verisimilitude, truth within, you hear the voice that says, now, proceed. And no matter what else but I won't make enough money doing that, or I won't be ever become president, or I won't be touted as one of the greatest there is. No, this is what you came here to do, is the calling, because then you know. And as Rayton said, at the end of the day, you cannot lie to your own consciousness. And so the consciousness provides the sound vibration necessary for the unconscious call that comes, that you know is truthfully aligned with you.
One thing I was curious about with regard to calling, if you wouldn't mind elaborating, was when you mentioned to the group of massage therapists that they were a group of closet healers, there may have been some implication that they had some capacity to facilitate healing, and without making assumptions, could we then say that maybe they have some gifts and abilities that then require them to get in touch with their calling so that they can more effectively and efficiently facilitate that work, and as it pertains to their calling? So what I'm curious about is how does one answer that call, and how do they start on that journey or continue on that journey of getting to know what that calling's all about, so that they can function or respond to life centered within their true calling, so that they can be all they were designed to be?
That's a very powerful, insightful question. Here's the way I'll answer it. We must pray for the courage to withstand the intimate search for the truth within. The intimate search for the truth within. And we can pretend, we can build upon something else that does not require us to struggle and carry the burden of learning things about ourselves that perhaps we don't want to know. But the only way to be willing to change is to be willing to know. And as Prigogine said in the 70s, that the only road to change is friction. So I often tell healers, people who are truly wanting to be a healer, that if you truly want to be a healer, you have to be willing to shake someone up. You have to be willing to shake someone up, and that's a difficult request, because we love to be liked and accepted, and not step out of the comfort zone, as Marcel and other philosophers have talked about. But when a calling comes, and as I saw in that Soma class 20 some odd years ago, I looked across the room, and there's something that I pay attention to, and it's called an auric field. And it is that dynamic glow that's around people and also in groups. And you can see the glow in the room. And one of the cautions, one of the things that presented itself to me was I would be saddened with all this talent, with all this potential, if the people in this room only sought to be mechanics in their trade, that they were perfunctory about the things that they had, the tools that they had learned, and not use these tools as a mechanism to go deeper and wider. And so the closet healer is someone who never really tampers with their potential. They don't want to know, because failure is a fear. And we know in psychology that in the absence of information, there's anxiety. But in order to surpass that which has presented itself to you, you must go deeper and further. And it requires a great deal of courage and faith. It requires also faith. And so when I looked in that room and I saw those sparkling bright eyes, the perspicacity that was out in front, the words that poured forth was closet healers. because I want you to dare to open that door and step out into yourself. Because yourself will tell you, not the books, they'll train you, not the instructors, they'll guide you, but the self that will inform you of what's needed from the other person. There is a sacred bond at that point when you're willing to come out and say, I am here because I was called by you to help you in your healing process. You see, when we give up our egoic aspects, we realize that we aren't another person's healer. They're their own healer. We provide the space and safety for them to access what's there. And so, in order to do that, you must be willing to lay down your egoic path and come out and say in a humble fashion, whatever it is you need, I will show up honestly for, by providing safe space for you and offering a competency through my stewardship, my effort, that makes me humble. And so in my way, I often say it's for me asking permission to bring my unearned intimacy into their intimate space, because mine is on the outside. They give me the privilege to walk in, and then when I'm there, to listen to the pathways their psyches, their soul is directing me, and their body is vibrating toward an amelioration that I otherwise would not have seen. So the calling is when you listen to the sacred voice that calls to you, that says to you, it's time. You're here with purpose. So every time I start a session, whether it's talk therapy, hands-on, vibrational medicine, myofascial trigger point therapy, shamanistic work, thaumaturgy, whatever it is, I start by quieting myself first, centering myself, and asking for permission, asking for sacred guidance, tapping into the ultimate of ultimate concerns, and saying, thank you for allowing me to be prepared, and keep me in your stead, so that when I reach the unknown waters, I'll have a knowing, because the soul gives you knowing, the mind gives you information.
You've taught and encouraged about the importance of sacred space and creating a safe environment for someone else's story to be revealed. There's this idea of energetic ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what that really entails, and kind of tying in this idea of calling and this idea of having these potential gifts that may or may not be cultivated by the culture with which we're brought up in, and with our primary and secondary education. We don't necessarily teach meditation. We don't necessarily teach the human being to connect with that spiritual aspect of their being, which the soulful aspect of their being, which is where this knowing and this concept of or this idea of a calling, correct me if I'm wrong, comes from. So how can what would you be able to share with us regarding that whole idea of unearned intimacy, energy ethics, so to speak? What is that all about, and what does that entail? How can we become more safer with one another and be more productive in our pursuit of encouraging and loving and caring for other people?
I think out of all the questions you've been asking, they're brilliant, by the way. As I'm sitting here and you're interviewing me, I feel like sitting in the audience or on a seat and listening to you for about a couple of hours. What you've gleaned over the years is phenomenal. It's wonderful. But one of the things that comes to mind when you talk about energetic ethics, and some of the things that we've been chatting about thus far, for me, it's the dignity of informed consent. I'm going to tell you first what my plan of action is in your treatment. I want you to know my conceptualization based on what you've allowed me to see in you. And I want to play it back to you, summarize, and ask you if I have permission to proceed. And this is what proceeding looks like. And if they say, indeed, and then I'll say, yes, but as we continue to venture, I will stop at times and ask you, how are you doing? Is this okay? Can we go further? There are guidelines. And I am bound by certain ethical requirements. And so if those ethical requirements don't meet some of your fears or comfort zones or boundaries, let me know, because this therapy is about you. And it's important that you have the quintessential aspects of confidentiality, professionalism, protectedness, and for you to know that I intend to make every indefatigable effort to make certain that what you came in here asking for can be provided, or else I ethically will refer you to someone else I may know that could help in this work with your journey to healing. I think that that is a very important aspect as healers, as people in this kind of practice holistically, that we have to pay attention to. Because too often I've seen people not perform as healers but as magicians, which the notoriety then is for them to be ostentatious at parties or in settings where they can say, I can read your energy field and I can see that there's a shoulder or quadratus lumbarum, a QL or something, a knee that seems to have blockage in it, and with no intention of taking care of it right then and there, and shouldn't in a non-private, non-clinical setting. Simply spew out things that perhaps are private and could be embarrassing, and revealing things that are not appropriate. And so I am, and I also am very vehement, as you've known through the years, about knowing that even though the person has given us permission to work with them, their body, their personage, their spirit belongs to them. It is not mine to determine. And that's why I get into the aspects of domination, that there can be people who come into the dominant spirit with a feeling of righteousness. I'm doing good, so therefore, as opposed to the person who's doing bad. But domination is domination. It's when I decide I know better than you what's good for you, instead of asking you and guiding you into the power of you. Thank you for asking that, though. That was that's very important to me.
What I'm curious about, and what I'm sure people that are interested in this work are curious about, they see someone like you and they say, man, this guy, I mean, he sounds like he's really got it together, and he seems like a person who can really be efficient in facilitating this work. What could I possibly have to offer, or how could I ever get to where he is? Or is there a way for them to use that information in such a way where they can check themselves and say, well, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be him, and yet something is resonating with me about this idea of a calling, and then how can I then now pursue that? Were you always this way, or what is this the progression or the current version of Kurt, which is probably a little bit different than when you were first discerning your own call to do this work? Can you tell us about your history with this idea of a calling, and when you realized your calling and how that ended up playing out?
Let me start with Teilhard de Chardin. Teilhard de Chardin is, I will quote him as saying, we're part of the ineluctable modality of being, which means that we're ever-growing, changing of being. Hegel said we're a body, no, we are beings constantly in motion. But one of the things Hegel also said, which was always fascinating to me, and it translates this way, that spirit made essence identical with our behavior, with who we are, our growth and movement. So essence and our growth and movement, our being, are identical. Identical, which means that we are vast. The only thing prohibiting us from being who we are programs that were passed through our genetics that can be changed when we find ourselves in theta states or deep meditation, so that we can reprogram our neuromuscular developments or neurotransmitters to say, all right, you walking chemistry set, it's time to shift and change. But it's very powerful to know that anything that we choose to do, we are capable of doing, which is important to say that what we visualize, we actualize. My languaging into my vision has to deal with the way I interpret the symbols that were given me. But yours, from your perspective, may be different. The problem has been that we have ceased to be a-perspectable. We become singular in our perspective, saying that in dominance, there's only one way of seeing something, and therefore this is the correct perspective, dominance, as opposed to a-perspectable, which is a broad spectrum understanding of many aspects of being. Let me say this, that if you look at the third dimension and view it as a prism, and you think in terms of energy as light, when light hits a prism, it goes in many different directions. Therefore, I suggest that we are one possibility of the many possibilities we are. And so, as we sit here today, we are one possibility in this signature as Kurt. But it is respectful and part of what is necessary in soul investigation to allow for Dan or someone else to have other aspects of it. Otherwise, we have a conflict of hierophany. And that conflict of hierophany is when 10 different people race toward the sacred with different ideas, conflicting with each other on who's right, as opposed to saying we're all headed to the same direction, respect one another in an aperceptible manner. So therefore, when people say, I want to be you, I say, I am not your Messiah. I am not the last word in how it should be done. I am a possibility that it can. I am a possibility that this has been brought forward, and as a result, now it can unfold into extreme variations. Ken Wilber refers to those aspects in his book, Sex, Ecology, and Spirituality, as theory of holons. And so what I suggest to people when they say, can I do what you do or be who you are, I say, I am simply letting you know in consciousness that it can be done. So your realm of possibility can know that you can excel in whatever you came here to do. But to answer that question specifically about, am I the Kurt I was when I got started over 20 some odd years ago, 30 years ago? No. because of that ineluctable modality of being, ever growing, ever changing movement of being. And I've ventured to look at the data, the experimentation, the growth, the changes, and have allowed for creation. And one of the things that I hear myself referring to Hegel again, Hegel said, you cannot see past your experiences. And so what that taught me was that I must continue to experience. And as I experience, I'll get a broader perspective. And as I get a broader perspective, it will allow me to realize that I am not in this alone. That it's not my call to be alone. It's my call to join with the love that claims the healing that's necessary in all of us, so that we can help them, each and every one of us, including myself, to return to a sacred vibration, a core vibration.
One of the things that you taught me, or encouraged me with, was taking into consideration this idea of a calling and healer and all these different things. You encouraged me to witness potential in others in a way that encourages their pursuit of actualization of that potential. You really, really focus a lot, it seems, on encouraging other human beings to witness themselves as they truly are. And it sounds a lot like an act of love. Can you talk a little bit about love and how that pertains to your work? Does love have any role in your life experience?
You quiet me, because your question is so important. But many have ventured to describe what love is from, for instance, in his many writings about love. What is this aspect that we deal with? But it's everything. It's when you don't look at the world as separate. You know, it's very interesting because Einstein must have inculcated this numerous times when he said energy is a constant. Form changes, but energy is a constant. And we keep saying that, but we have always thought in terms of energy, be it you being an energy, somebody else being an energy, someone else being an energy. We've broken it up and not allowed it as a constant.
Yes.
And so what makes us possible is that we're constantly, consistently love. We are all joined together. We are not segregated, separated, dissected in a manner that causes us to ignore each other. There's this bond that draws us together in an absolute knowing, and it's quiet. I think that what happens is when people will tend to ask me, they'll say, well, how can that be? And I'll say, well, look at it this way. It's a difficult concept, but let's look at it this way. Think in terms of the energy being the ocean, and each one of us are waves in the ocean. Being a wave doesn't remove us from the ocean. It simply makes us an elevated part of the ocean or whatever. And when our wave is done, we go back to the ocean. It's important to know that we are all bound and gathered through our lovingness. This is where the soul meets itself. It's ego that takes us into the wave. And we sometimes forget that the wave does not determine the ocean. But in actuality, and I'll go back to Wilber's concept of the holone, that a holone is not a part or not a whole. It's a whole part. Though we can't be 100% the fraction, and we can't be 100% the whole. We must be whole part, knowing all of ourselves, knowing everything about ourselves, which means that I don't make determinations about your life. I simply witness, observe, and ask if you're fulfilling that which draws you to the peace of being. The peace of being. My dominance interferes when I say I have the right way of doing it. So I have what's called intellectual capacity of being instead of a loving, harmonious aspect of being, which lets me be a part of it all without dominance. And so when you're healing someone, I think it's even important not to make determinations that this is this energy blockage is cancer, this energy blockage is cardiovascular, this energy blockage is cerebral or whatever, like in a cerebral accident, but that there is something interfering with flow. And flow is love. Flow is creative. So we use within the individual self, not a mechanical tool, but imagination. Because imagination, as Einstein referred to, gives shape, form, and color to unformed mental energy. And that imagination is how we co-create with the divine. And when you co-create with the divine, you stand in love. Because in evil is separated, isolating itself from the love. Isolating itself from the love, I'm outside of the flow. And so if you're outside of the flow, you can't be in the process of illumination, growth. It's very interesting in that to think in terms of how brilliant light is, and light is one of the children of love, that it is, light can go into darkness, but darkness cannot go into light. So love takes us everywhere. Love is the answer to it all from a vibratory aspect. Because here's the thing, I can eradicate all the rules and regulations that institutionalized religiosity may offer by one thing: can I love? Because if I love you, I won't harm. I won't harm that which I love. It's when I convince myself that something's not lovable that I can harm it. So, to your question, I say that love is vital, and it's vital for the healer. And why is it so vital? Because the healer must first of all realize that I must love myself and join you in your love, and find out what areas are cloaking itself or adumbrating itself from the flow of love that you need inside of you. And let me help you with it so that I can empower you.
Talked a little bit about love, and specifically you mentioned the role of the healer and the importance of love within the process of the healer-healee relationship. My question is there something that a healer needs to do in regard to self-care, or a habit that they need to engage in to maximize their capacity to provide that safe space, to share that love for another human being? What do we need to do, Kurt, to maximize our capacity to remember we're a part of the ocean?
Wow. So, through my me-search and the research, what I've learned is that, as I was struggling earlier to remember what Hegel said about spirit making essence identical with its existence. So if essence and existence are identical, we are vast. We are vast. And so we must know that I am coming to you not only in my programmable self, but in my vastness. And in my vastness, I have knowledge of it all. And so in my knowledge of it all, I must be willing to accept myself in my knowing. And my knowing has sacred guidance. So how do I perpetuate that? You are what you practice. You are what you practice. You can theorize anything, but if you don't have a practice that helps you inculcate your principles to yourself and around yourself, I say that you have missed the mark. I think that is essential for us to ask questions of ourselves. There are two methodologies that I utilize. One is Dr. Perlman's concept of Gestalt therapy, which is empty chair therapy. In fact, it's kind of amusing that you asked me this. 2 weeks ago, I sat down and I invited to the empty chair Kurt at 45. And I wanted to talk to him about some of his philosophies and concepts and theories of change, and compare how this 70-year-old is different from that, and how we commingling, and what part of me learned from you, and did I continue to evolve, or am I standing on the shoulders of what was acceptable by you in your community? And it was a very interesting dialogue. It took me about an hour. And then, because I guess I enjoy the punishment, I started saying, well, it's time for me to search my file of people that perhaps I don't have closure with, and invite them to the empty chair as well. Because see, here's what happens. When you're interacting with people, usually they have a defense mechanism. You're talking to them, and it's called procatalyptic responses, where all while you're talking, they're thinking about how they're going to answer their questions, so they're not really listening to what you're saying. But this is reflective when it's empty and all you're doing is spilling. And it's very interesting that this is scientific and also psychological and also shamanistic, but it's also biblical, because we talk in terms of spilling, relieving ourselves of that which we have egoically arrived upon. And so as I sat and spoke to individuals that I still had challenges with, I was able to overhear myself release the blockages I had about a willingness to love and expand. And so that's important to continue to look at self. So it's part of the practice. So Gestalt therapy helps me. I also do things like, one of my practices, my methodology is to spend 3 minutes in the morning before I start my day just looking at my own face in the mirror and hope that it doesn't crack. But I'll sit there, and the whole purpose of that is before you brush your teeth, comb your hair, or do something, you are having a interaction with your own eyes. Because what we realize is that somewhere around 2 and 3, we realize that we can't see our own faces. And so if we're about to reach for a cookie, we'd look and see what kind of expression mom or dad had, and then we'd reach for the cookie. Or we'd look at the expression if mom had a grimace and reach for the cookie and run like the Dickens, But over the years we forgot that we don't see our own faces. And so we make determinations through the reactions of others. And as a result, we become ingratiating and we lose our individuality. And the individuality is to know how you're answering to the data presented you. And that's a practice. And so the mirror helps you in that. 3 minutes is a long time to do so. It's a process. So some people I'll tell, and even myself, I'll say this is a tough day. So you might only make it through a minute, but each day come back. And so it puts me in touch with what my face really looks like, what my soul is really trying to tell me, what thoughts come up when I am fully present to myself. Because all day I ask others to allow me to be present with them. But if I ask that, I have to also be willing to accept that in myself. And so being fully present is very important to a healing process, to an honest interchange. So practice. What's my practice to reinforce my promise to healing? And so that's something that I realize that each day as I grow, that I must accept there might be areas I could have been wrong about in my processing that need to be reevaluated, because otherwise I'm just arguing with myself to prove something incorrect right. So, which makes me a demagogue, not a healer. I think that having a higher power that you answer to, that keeps one from stumbling into the throes of being a charlatan or a sorcerer, when it becomes about you and how well you do egoically, as opposed to the humbling aspect of healing, which is, I'm here to present what I know in good faith and love for you. My motto each day is to ask myself if today I can do the truth in love. If I can do the truth in love. And then at night, as Radin will remind my consciousness, sits with me and says, well, did you do it? Sometimes yes, and sometimes it's, well, you see, the situation was like this, the politics of the soul.
Yes.
And but it's being willing to take yourself to task, being willing to know that we're in it together, that what your quest is as vital as mine, that my peregrination toward truth is not greater than your journey, but that we're in it together and we can learn from the experiences of others. So my ultimate question, which I hope draws some understanding or semblance of an answer to your question, is that I ask myself a very vital question constantly. I ask myself, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered? And in order to be remembered as the truth, I must have a practice of truth. And if my practice does not honor how I choose to be remembered, then I can be self-corrective on my own.
Since we kind of ended off on a little bit of self-care talk and practice, I just wanted to give something to you.
Oh, thank you.
I like to make something called a lomi stick, and you'll see on the top of it I burned in there, it says Lomi Strong, Kurt.
Oh my goodness.
Lomi in Hawaii, of course, if you look up the definition of the term, you might find some correlation to massage therapy, but according to Kaipo Kaneakua, he would say that Lomi is how we share our love with one another. And the reason why I came up with this concept of Lomi Strong was because all of those Hawaiian teachers that I've had, they do the work until the end of their days. I just so resonate with so much of what you talked about today. And it's been such a great impact on me and my work and the people that I see in my practice and the students that I teach. And I just have the greatest sense of appreciation and love. And so I just wanted to give this Lomi stick to you as something that you can bring with you in the rest of your day today and tomorrow and the rest of time to continue that practice of taking care of this incredible vessel for healing energy to cover and to pass through as you share with other people. And I just want to thank you so much for being you and for answering your call to be Kurt Hill and all Kurt Hill was called to be. And just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
I'm rendered speechless, and you know that takes a lot. But thank you very, very much. This Lomi Strong symbol, this peace that you have provided me with, will not only take me into myself, but I will take it into my healing wherever I go. And I really, really am honored. What a noble, noble gesture. And I appreciate our meeting, our journey, our brotherhood in healing. Thank you very much. Thank you. This is beautiful. I have one question.
Sure.
We've spoken now for close to 45 minutes to an hour. How did you hide this thing so I didn't see it the whole while? It already has magical qualities. This is wonderful.
I can tell you, but
Oh yeah. This is wonderful. Wow, it feels good too. It
it's
just,
strong.
I just want to hug it.
This is just a small token of, so many people have been touched by your words, by your encouragement, and your practice. Your practice has cultivated this capacity in such a great way, and my hope is that, for whoever may potentially see this video, that they would also be encouraged to do the work necessary to step through that fire of discomfort, that friction, as you mentioned, to be able to really shed the agreements, as you mentioned, that don't serve us anymore, so that we can step fully into that calling and really get more out of life than ever before.
Oh, thank you. Really good. Really good.
You know,
Namaste, my friend.
Namaste.